بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. I remind you, dear brothers and sisters in Islam, to have a sincere intention in your heart when attending the lesson, seeking reward from Allah Ta'ala. For those of you who watched the previous lesson and who attended, you know we talked about the 17 integrals of the prayer. And we said that an integral is part of the deed. Without it, the deed would not be valid. So the prayer has, according to Imam al-Shafi'i, radiyallahu anh, 17 integrals that the person has to satisfy for one's prayer to be valid. The 17th integral was to observe the order that we mentioned. This means one has to do the integrals of the prayer in the order that they were mentioned. So one would then not perform sujood, prostration, before performing ruku', for example. Okay, so one has to perform the integrals in order. Now, what happens if a person while praying forgets an integral? So if one does that unintentionally, so let's say if a person left out the ruku' forgetfully, okay, not intentionally, what happens in this case? So if one forgets an integral, one must return to it right away, unless one has performed the same type of integral, or one is now performing the same type of integral, or what comes after it. In this case, then they complete the cycle, and what was performed in between is disregarded. Let's give an example. If a person forgot to make ruku', okay, so the person was standing up, recited Al-Fatiha, and then instead of making ruku', if this person went right away to prostration sujood, if this person remembers having left out ruku' while they are prostrating, immediately in this case, they go back, stand up, and make ruku'. Okay, right away, they go stand up to make ruku'. Because in this case, they have not yet reached the ruku' in the second rak'ah, and nor what comes after it. So they are still within that same rak'ah, same cycle, where they forgot to make the ruku' in. So here, immediately they leave what they're doing, they stand up to go down for ruku'. Now, in the case that one does not remember having left out an integral, for example, in our case, the ruku', if the person does not remember having left out the ruku' until one has reached the subsequent ruku' or what comes after it, in this case, one continues, one completes that, and what was performed in between is disregarded. So one would count this now as having completed the cycle with this ruku', because the first one did not perform the ruku' in it, and what was performed in between would be disregarded. Okay, so if the person then, for instance, does not remember leaving out bowing ruku' until after one bows in the subsequent cycle, in the subsequent rak'ah, or in the sujood after that subsequent bowing, then what was performed in between, as we said, is nullified, and one counts this one now as their rak'ah. Insha'Allah ta'ala, now we will move on to our next chapter, which talks about the congregational prayer. Jama'ah, praying in congregation. That means not individually, rather in congregation. We say in Arabic, Jama'ah. So praying the 5 prayers, the 5 obligatory prayers in congregation, Jama'ah, is a communal obligation referred to as Fard Kifaya in Arabic. It's a communal obligation, not a personal obligation, but a communal obligation. upon whom we will talk about that inshallah in a moment. So a communal obligation, fard kifaya, if some perform it in a way that it is sufficient, satisfied, then those who do not perform it would not be sinful for not having performed it in congregation. But of course, there is great reward in performing the prayer in congregation. So when one is able to do that, then let one do that actually and pray the prayer in congregation, the 5 obligatory prayers. It is a communal obligation upon the free person, the pubescent, the resident males who are unexcused. So by saying here free, we're excluding the slave. By saying pubescent, we are excluding the child who is not yet pubescent. Of course, this child who is mumayyiz can pray the prayer in congregation. And as we said, there is reward, there's more reward in performing the 5 obligatory prayers in congregation. So this child who is mumayyiz but not pubescent yet is encouraged to pray the 5 obligatory prayers in congregation. But it's not a communal obligation upon this child. And as you know, the one who is not accountable, it is not an obligation upon him. So then we said it is a communal obligation upon the free person who is pubescent, and we said male, so that excludes the females. Of course, the female can perform the 5 obligatory prayers in congregation, and also that would entail more reward if she does so. Okay, but I want to draw your attention to an important matter here. If the female performs the prayer in congregation, another female can be the imam. Okay, she can lead the prayer when the other ones are all females. A female cannot lead the prayer when there are males praying with her. Okay, no. In that case, a male would be the imam in the prayer. A female can lead the prayer when the rest of those who are praying with her in congregation are females. Then a female can be the imam in this prayer. All right. So, and if the imam is a male, of course, she can pray with them in congregation. But it is not a communal obligation upon the females. And excluded also here is the traveler. And those who have an Islamically acceptable excuse. So the person who has the judgment of a traveler, upon this person, upon this male, it is not a communal obligation, but of course this person can pray the 5 obligatory prayers in congregation, and there would be more reward for him to do so. Okay? So we said then it is a communal obligation when performing the 5 obligatory prayers. However, it is a personal obligation, meaning in Arabic fard ayn, in the Jumu'ah prayer. The Jumu'ah prayer, the Friday prayer, it is prayed in congregation. The Jumu'ah prayer is not prayed individually. It is prayed in congregation. Okay, so in this case, it is a personal obligation. Upon whom? Upon those same people that we mentioned earlier. So we said then the male who is not a traveler and who does not have an Islamically acceptable excuse, and who is pubescent and free, and who lives in buildings, not in tents. Okay, and they need to be 40 a minimum of 40 in order to hold the Friday prayer, the Jumu'ah prayer. They need to be at least 40 males, including the imam. 40 males who satisfy these aforementioned conditions that we mentioned, including the imam. Minimum. Okay, so if they are not 40, then they would pray Dhuhr prayer and not the Friday prayer. So it is then the Friday prayer is a personal obligation upon them, the ones that we mentioned, if they were 40 accountable inhabitants who live in buildings, not in tents, because it is not an obligation on the tent dwellers. Now, the Jumu'ah prayer is also obligatory upon those who intend to stay in the place of the Jumu'ah prayer, where the Jumu'ah prayer is being held, for 4 complete days, excluding the day of entry and the day of exit. So, if a person was traveling, but then he entered the place where the Jumu'ah prayer is being conducted, and this person intends to remain in that place for 4 complete days, excluding the day of entry and the day of exit, then this person would be obligated to pray the Friday prayer with them. Okay? It is also obligatory upon those who can hear the call of a loud-voiced person standing at the closest edge of the settlement to them. So if this person can hear the call to the prayer, then it would be obligatory upon them to join the Jumu'ah Friday prayer. Now, I want you also to be aware here, even though it is not an obligation upon the female to pray the Jumu'ah prayer, however, the female is allowed to perform the Jumu'ah prayer. Okay, they are not prohibited from going and attending. Of course, when the female goes to the mosque, of course, it is important for her to adhere to proper clothing. Of course, she needs to cover her aura and adhere to proper clothing, and she would not be prohibited from entering the mosque and praying the Friday prayer as well. And this was the case at the time of our beloved Prophet ﷺ. Females used to come and join the congregational prayers with the males. They used to stand behind them. The Prophet ﷺ did not prohibit them from doing that. So they are allowed to do that. Insha'Allah ta'ala, in our next lesson, we will talk about the conditions for the validity of the Jumu'ah, the Friday prayer, in addition to the integrals of the Jumu'ah Friday prayer. And Allah ta'ala knows best.